kampung tu disproportionately male, tapi yang buat kerja ni semua wanita lah. We all know this, right? Thank you. Jangan lupa ya, saya punya comeback 2026 mungkin. No, because I know this, because I mean my old party, UMNO, bila kita ada mesyuarat cawangan, yang datang semua wanita je. Datang semua wanita. Laki semua isap rokok kat luar. Okay. Anyway, so a lot of the solutions are community based, and I wanted to talk about this because we have a lot of big national documents, National Energy Transition Roadmap, Net Zero 2050. So by 2050 ni kononnya Malaysia, not kononnya lah, but our aspiration is that we are net zero. Our carbon emission is offset by mitigation and adaptation measures so that we are net zero by 2050. But let's face it, Sri, a lot of these things need to happen on the ground in communities. Kita cakap je at the national level, but at the end of the day, if the communities are not doing it, at the kampung level, at the housing estate level, then it's not going to work.
Absolutely, and I think change happens when communities mobilize, right? I think women have such an important role, not just in terms of what they can do, but also what they can influence. So the influence obviously will be on their children. Women will talk to their children, educate their children, but also talk to their husbands. I remember in one talk that I gave, I talked about conflict and working in Afghanistan, and I worked during the time of Taliban. And I said, I was so fortunate being a woman because I could go into the homes of these people. And whether you're Taliban or not, when your wife speaks to you, you listen. So, So I think that women have a real distinct role, and I think it starts from home, right? If through organizations like ASEWA, go down to communities, educate them on how harmful it is, some of the things they're doing, how they move towards a much more sustainable lifestyle. Because the challenge, though, people will say, sustainability need to work higher. Not really. It's about going back to basics, going back to, for example, what diet you give your children to eat. If you can cut down your meat intake, because agriculture, particularly livestock agriculture, is one of the biggest causes of degradation of forests. And if we can say start with meatless Mondays, meatless Fridays, I know. So I think, but it's important because there's just not enough water left in future to sustain these farms, these large farms, right? If you have grazing animals, that's why orang kata ayam kampung, kambing yang you don't breed in large feedlots, right? So it's much healthier than those that you give. And the things that they give them to eat. You have to remember that when you want to mass-produce meat, it's pumped with antibiotics. That causes another problem of antimicrobial resistance in the future, which is estimated to kill about 10 million people by 2050. So there's a lot of harm in the choices that we make, even with food.
That's why I want to bring the discussion to how Malaysia is doing. Because we speak about the global boundaries in climate change, in air pollution, in biomes, biodiversity, and things like that. Are we doing okay in Malaysia? Because we should be blessed, right? God has blessed this country as a carbon sink, supposedly. Carbon sink meaning that we have tropical jungle, and that takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So we are one of the biggest carbon sinks in the world. So surely we are not a problem, right? We're doing well, right?
So let's go back to science and evidence, right? So this diagram that you see on the slides comes from something called the University of Leeds Good Life Index. What they have measured is they look at the inner circle, and this is to do with donor economics. The inner circle is what you call social foundations, basically our sustainable development goals. The outer circle in green is your ecological ceiling, the planetary boundaries that I mentioned earlier. Now this research showed that I just put 3 countries to compare: Malaysia, United States, and Vietnam.
Kalau merah tu tak best lah.
Merah tak best. Merah is not good. So Malaysia has actually crossed about 7 boundaries. So it's not really good, and yet on the social front, we haven't really, we're not doing brilliant. I mean, it's there, better than many countries. But so we're almost like US, in the sense of our pollution per capita, right? But if you look at on the left, extreme left, Vietnam, which is an emerging economy, you will see that, okay, on the social side, maybe they also have some gaps, not much more than Malaysia, but they're doing quite well on their planetary boundaries. So what we need to do now, and when I engage with the Vietnamese government, I tell them, what is their number one worry? They tell me it's climate change. And I told them, no, it's beyond climate change, you need to look at this. So, in developing their economies in the future, they need to think about how it's going to impact. So I always say that, why can't we have this aspiration? China is the supply chain leader in the world. ASEAN is the sustainable supply chain leader of the world. So that mindset shift needs to happen. Therefore, economic development has to take a different role, because the EU, the US, and others will put on very strict measures and sanctions for unsustainable goods. So it's better for us to be.
So the data is showing that in terms of the environmental ceilings and the planetary boundaries, Vietnam is doing better than us.
Yes.
Are you sure? The communist country dia punya data tak transparent. No, I'm joking. So that's something of concern, which brings me to the broader point, actually, because I think you just ended your last intervention by saying that we have to start thinking about new aspirations.